Everybody, I am back with my 9th reading artifact, and I'm going to be using Mapping Composition, Inviting Disability in the Front Door by J. Dolmaj. I hope that's how you pronounce the last name. Anyhow, the first area that I was wanting to really talk about with his piece is the metaphor of the steep steps. And I really liked this visual that he provided, particularly when he linked it in with on page 18 with the Capitol crawl that he talks about from March 1990. That there was the ADAPT protest on at the Capitol where they brought, hundreds of people with disabilities just came and they tried to traverse the Capitol steps in any way that they could, and it really illustrated the difficulties that people with disabilities face in a world that has marginalized them. And so I really love that he used this illustration. I feel like not only in this sense, a very real world sense, but also as the metaphor for what happens in academia, where we put these steps there to to weed people out that we don't necessarily want there, for lack of a better phrase. Which that's not our call as educators, and administrators. That's not of course an appropriate response to just because we don't think somebody looks like the typical student that we want to have in our classroom doesn't mean that they are not able and that they shouldn't be there. I mean, they have every right to be there. So along with that idea of the steep steps, he pushes that a little bit further on 17. In the second full paragraph, it says, in composition, such steep steps come in the form of a restrictive grammar and usage rules that allow writing to be added up. And as a grammar Nazi, grammar has really, particularly this semester, has kind of been one of those things that I've been trying to figure out, because, like I said, I typically am a pretty big stickler for it. I know that going into the workforce, most students are gonna, when they apply for jobs, those HR people are sometimes English majors, and they're gonna, pick and choose whose resume goes on based on their inherent ability to, to write, to follow the rules of grammar. And so I've kind of had it in my head as a middle school and high school teacher to really try to get students to understand that they need to be able to follow those rules and to know those rules in order to eventually break them if they choose to, which kind of goes in the next video, in the final video. So I won't go there yet. But it also kind of ties into, and I am not going to be able to, the podcast that we listened to, or I read the transcription, and I cannot pronounce his name, but when he talks about how grammar is used as a way to kind of make people conform to this, this ideal student of being white and educated, and the problems that we have with that. I mean, that is a huge problem. I just don't know. It's something that I have been struggling with how to deal with that. So maybe reading Chandra's essay will help, illuminate some ways to balance what grammar, how grammar should be considered and judged, and within our grading systems and whatnot. So that was kind of my main takeaways, because like I said, when you think about people who have, like, learning disabilities, and making accommodations for those learning disabilities, some of those typical ways that we would grade can't and shouldn't really apply to them, and how we so if we're going to have access in our class, and consider how each student, make sure that our syllabi and the text that we use, the presentation of the text, really is as inclusive as possible. It's kind of lost my train of thought, but I hope that you kind of understood where I was going with that. Just that we need to make sure that we're not marginalizing our students, and that we are providing those accommodations even up front, so they don't always necessarily have to ask for them, that our courses are kind of designed around making sure that we already have as much access as we can think of for a range of students. That way, and maybe even having plans and having somebody to talk to about how to make sure that those particular students who need a different form of access that we haven't thought of, having that other sounding board to kind of brainstorm those ideas on how we can really help that particular student with what to face the challenges that they need to face and to be successful. And that's ultimately the goal of any class, is to that's my goal as a teacher, is to make sure that I set my students up for as much, for success, and that's up to them then, to reach that success. So anyhow, I hope that all makes sense. But that is kind of what some of my main takeaways. I didn't want to get too much into the grammar because I kind of talk about that in the next video. So stay tuned. Anyhow, I will see you soon.